Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jerry Elmer. I'm a senior attorney for the Conservation Law Foundation. We support this bill and respectfully urge you to pass it. As you may know, we are litigating in both the Energy Facility Siting Board and the PUC trying to defeat the licensing and permitting of this plant. We've had access to thousands of pages of discovery documents about the plant, including some that are not public. So we speak with some firsthand knowledge about what the issues are of the plant. I'd like to discuss just two issues. One is whether the plant is needed, and the other is this issue of precedent that Senators Archambault and Lombardi were raising. What will this do in other cases? As Senator Nesselbush said correctly, this is not your first rodeo here. So those are two issues I'd like to look at. You all saw the editorial in yesterday's Providence Journal urging you to defeat this bill. The first sentence of the editorial in yesterday's paper described the plant as, quote, vitally needed, unquote. That's just not true. As you know, the ISO New England is the entity charged by FERC with running the electricity grid in New England in real time. It runs the wholesale electricity markets for New England and is in charge of making sure that we have enough electricity at all times, including in the future. Once a year in February, the ISO runs this forward capacity market designed to buy electricity capacity for a one-year period, 3 years in the future. And on February 8th of this year, the ISO conducted its 10th forward capacity auction for the one-year period starting June 1st, 2019, the date that Invenergy wants to go online according to its EFSB application. The results of the ISO auction show two things unequivocally. One is that Invenergy's electricity is not needed for New England. And the second is that Invenergy's electricity is not needed for Rhode Island. In my written testimony to you, I provided a link to the ISO website on page 1 of my testimony. And I invite you to go to the ISO website and check the figures that I'm about to give you to see whether or not they're correct. Invenergy tried to sell 1,000 megawatts into the ISO auction. They only cleared under half, 450 megawatts. The ISO was trying to buy in the last auction for June 1st, 2019, taking into account all the plants that are going to close, like Pilgrim, all the new plants that are coming online and are already in the queue. The ISO wanted to buy 34,151 megawatts for all of New England. In fact, they cleared 35,567 megawatts. That's an excess of 1,416 megawatts. The plant is not needed in New England. In the zone in Rhode Island.
Senator Nesselbush.
Just to try to cut us to the chase here, so why would a company want to invest millions of dollars to build a plant for energy that's not needed? Just if you could speed up and get to the point,
because they are going to make a great deal of money on the capacity market flow of income and on the energy market flow of income. It is a very, very good plant for the investors and shareholders of Invenergy. But the ISO is telling you that you don't need the electricity for keeping the grid reliable. Here in Rhode Island, in this zone, this import-constrained zone, the ISO was trying to get 10,028 megawatts for the Invenergy period. They cleared 11,384. They cleared 1,300 megawatts extra in this zone. You take out all of Pilgrim, 677 megawatts. You take out all of Invenergy, 450 megawatts. You still have a surplus. The plant is not vitally needed.
So where will, Mr. Chair?
Senator Nestor-Bush, then Senator Metts.
Thank you. So where will this energy go? Are you suggesting that there's another area of the country that needs it and this will somehow go on the grid, make them rich, but the energy will go elsewhere?
No, the energy will be sold into the ISO New England footprint, 6 New England states. It'll flow according to the transmission constraints that are on the system. According to the materials that Invenergy filed with the EFSB, it appears that they expect to only be operating 52% of the time. That would
But how
be
do they make money if you're saying there's no market for it? It's not needed. There's no market.
They make money in 2 separate ways. One way is by clearing in the capacity auction, they get a stream of capacity market payments regardless of whether or not they're selling any energy into the system simply for being available. That's what capacity is. It's a separate, different commodity from energy, and then they can also sell into the energy market. So that is 2 separate streams of payment.
Metts.
If I can't, I believe it was earlier testimony. If I was listening clearly, I believe if I was listening clearly, I believe someone said earlier that the cost of energy in Rhode Island was higher than the rest of New England. I thought I heard that. I could be mistaken. So given the supply, given the rules of supply and demand, and your testimony now, what's going to happen to the cost?
It is undoubtedly true that Invenergy will have some effect on the overall cost of electricity in New England. Our understanding and the testimony that we're going to file in the PUC on Tuesday of next week, which I'll be glad to share with this committee, suggests that the figures being used by Invenergy of ratepayer impacts are grossly misstated, and importantly, the information provided by Invenergy at the EFSB hearing in Burrillville High School in front of 700 people on Thursday, March 31st of this year, those figures about ratepayer savings and impact were not only factually incorrect, although they were, but that Invenergy knew at the time that the information was given that the information was incorrect. I'd like to turn, if I may, to the second point that I wanted to address.
Senator Lombardi and then Senator Archibald, but before that, we hear the bell ringing. At some point when the floor starts and they start voting on bills, they're going to summons us to go downstairs.
And I would like just a moment at the end to sum up a final point, if I may.
Senator Lombardi.
Well, you brought up the last discussion with Senator Metts brought up a second point that I hadn't thought of. At the PUC level, where you intend to present your case, if there is a finding of lack of need for this facility, does that kill the project?
No, it does not. The PUC proceeding in docket 4609 is an advisory opinion to the EFSB that has the sole final permitting authority. The PUC is considering 2 issues, the need for the project and the ratepayer impacts, but the PUC's decision in 4609 is advisory only.
Okay, which brings me to my next point. Assuming, and I don't have any reason to question the veracity of your numbers, assuming that to be the case, we have an entity prepared to spend millions of dollars in our state, generating, perhaps by your own admission, to be a profitable entity that will create jobs in our state, and at the same time provide the town of Burrillville, according to their town council, whoever that may be, a guarantee of $92 million to $180 million in tax payments to the town. Where's the downside?
Here's the downside. You, I believe, have correctly put your finger on what may be the only benefit from the Invenergy proposal. They're proposing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars building a fracked gas, carbon-emitting, fossil fuel power plant in Rhode Island that is not needed for energy. Will it create some jobs? Yes, it will. Those jobs and those jobs created need to be balanced against the downsides of building a new fossil fuel plant whose energy is not needed. But the benefit that you're describing, I think, is irrefutable.
Senator Archibald.
Thank you, Billy. Let's go to the piece you submitted, page 2, near the bottom. And I want to focus on the ratepayer savings. You say, nor are there any ratepayer savings from the Invenergy plant. Invenergy's argument about ratepayer savings is predicated on the idea that the price for capacity here in the SENE zone will be much higher than the rest of New England. You wanted to say that, in fairness to Invenergy, that was true for the capacity at those auctions in the past 3 years, really.
2 years. You
say 2 years, but then you say it's not true this year. How do we know that? You say, and there's no shortage of the generation capacity in the SENE zone. You're a lot smarter than this than I am, and I'm trying to follow your reasoning here. You say it only have a small impact on what ratepayers would save. There would be some impact, but you're considering de minimis when you put it up against the balancing test that you just set before us. How do we know in the future that in those auctions for capacities, with the fluctuation in the costs of these utilities, that argument is going to hold true? Help me just logically to understand, because...
Here's the answer. The reason that the capacity clearing price crashed between forward capacity auction 9 and 10 wasn't an accident, it wasn't a coincidence. The ISO had built out transmission between the Northeast Massachusetts-Boston zone and Rhode Island, so that where we live in Rhode Island is no longer an import-constrained zone. That transmission has a life expectancy of 50 years. What changed isn't going to unchange. The transmission build-outs that the ISO, you don't change ISO capacity zones by political pressure and lobbying. It's all physics. It's the way the electrons flow. And the transmission that was built out has a life expectancy of 50 years. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I want to close with...
Can you just say that again one more time, down one level in a lay perspective? Just go back over that one more time, please.
In forward capacity auctions 8 and 9, Rhode Island was in an import-constrained zone where it was difficult or impossible and expensive to bring electricity into Rhode Island from outside the zone. Just like there used to be 10 years ago an import-constrained zone in Fairfield County, southwestern Connecticut. Knowing that the zone here was constrained, the ISO spent lots of money and lots of years building new transmission capability into Rhode Island. The result was shown in the auction on February 8th, when the clearing price for capacity in this zone crashed from $17 per kilowatt month to $7.03, the identical clearing price in Rhode Island to the rest of the pool. That means that there's no shortage here compared to the rest of New England, no extra price for getting electricity here because it's not needed. That's why Invenergy bid in 1,000 megawatts and only cleared 450, because the grid operator said, we don't need it.
Okay, but can you say with absolute certainty, Jerry, that it's going to remain constant?
We can say with absolute certainty that the transmission build-outs that exist today have a life expectancy of 50 years, and the trend is toward less and less import constraints, not toward more and more. But as a matter of epistemology, nobody knows the future.
Well, that's why I want to tie you down, because we're talking about stabilization. You've learned as a lawyer, don't ask questions you don't know the answer to. I'm certain you can't say that, with all due respect, that these auctions for this rate setting are going to be able to be known not to fluctuate in the out years. You can't say that, right?
As a matter of epistemology, we don't know the future with certainty. You're absolutely right about that. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I want to finish with one.
Senator Jabbar has a question, and Senator Lombardi.
I have a question. Jerry, thank you for your testimony. We've been talking about the balancing tests here, and I think you have enough knowledge to share with this committee. I haven't heard anybody talk about the environmental impact of this particular structure on the actual site, what the surrounding area will accept or not be able to accept by virtue of what the plant will be doing.